ことのほか広し、広さグッドなコンパクト、ダイハツムーン初売り、豚マクロス発進、花来業も新登場、歴代の歌姫と楽しめる、こんなリズムゲームめったにないんだからね。豚マクロススマホで買っちゃうや。
All right. Good evening, everyone. So, if there is one thing the internet is sure of, is that there is something off about Japanese commercials. Now sure, some of the indecipherability comes from a simple language barrier. Without the benefits of subtitles, a non-Japanese speaker can find it hard to understand what's going on. And even in today's increasingly global world, often even the brand being advertised can be an unknown. Who here knows what SoftBank is? Or AU? Or Hapitas? Yes, the world of advertising in Japan can be ridiculous and strange to Western audiences. But is that simply a matter of language? Or are there other qualities that make them so unique to our Western acclimated brains? Welcome everyone to Adventures in Advertising Commercials in Japan. I'm your host, Victor Frost. I'm a professional audio engineer, and I run a production company called Frostworks, where we produce a bevy of eclectic, entertaining, and educational content. Or at least 2 out of 3. Today we're going to be taking a look at Japanese television advertising and try to understand them from both a structural and a stylistic standpoint, and to see if we can make some generalizations about them, in the same way we would with other genres of media. To do this, we're not only going to look at the aesthetic qualities of commercials, visuals, editing, sound, but also how they fulfill their primary function in being commercials. That is to say, how do they convince consumers to purchase the product or use the service? What arguments do they make? What information do they present? Now, I am not the first person to ask these questions. In 1987, Jyotika Ramaprasad and Kazumi Hasegawa, professor and grad student respectively at Michigan State University, conducted a study analyzing the informational content of 410 prime-time Japanese television commercials. And 2 years later, they conducted another study, this time of 373 commercials, and the results they found were interesting, but we will get to those later. Using their studies as models, I decided to replicate their research methodology. However, unlike Ramaprasad and Hasegawa, I am not looking to prove or disprove a hypothesis. I'm simply looking to collect data and make observations based on that data. I figured I could look at their data, look at the data that I collect, and see how things have changed over time. Well, to see if and or how things have changed over time. On the ground in Japan, tuning their VCRs to TV stations, recording whatever aired during the specified times. I neither live in nor have people in Japan. Thankfully, the internet being the internet, there are several YouTube channels dedicated to uploading Japanese commercials in full HD. The channel I picked was JPCM HD, or Japanese Commercials in HD. And I downloaded all of the commercials they had from December 2017 through April 2018, roughly the same span of time used in both studies, which came out to 428 commercials. Actually, no, more than that. The only thing problematic about this is I don't know if the commercials uploaded were selected at random, like in the Ramaprasad Hasegawa study, or if they were selected based on the uploader's personal preferences, or if they were just whatever the person recorded. Not knowing this means an argument could be made that the data I collected is not scientifically rigorous enough, or that it's a case of comparing apples and oranges. Problem number 2, I don't speak Japanese. Sure, I could muddle through half of a conversation barely, but I don't have nearly the language skills necessary to understand, any high-level conversational topics, and I definitely do not understand weird cultural tropes or contexts. So, in the interest of science, I hired a small team of researchers who do understand Japanese. They collected all of the raw data for the study, and I simply cannot stress enough how big of a role they played. So thank you to Aki-M, Catriel Page, and Rose Rappaport for your amazing contribution to this study. Finally, problem number 3. And this isn't really a problem so much as it is a disclaimer. The research for this is not complete. Don't get me wrong. We have a lot of data, like a lot. But there is more research on the subject that I want to do, particularly in terms of comparing to American commercials. At the same time, though, I know a lot about American commercials because I'm American, with a degree in the cinema and television arts. But data is data, and anecdotal evidence is not data. So in the name of academic honesty, when I have a source to back up what I'm saying, whether it's data I've collected, or observational evidence, or an external source, it will be listed up down in the bottom right of the slide. Yes, I'm going to cite my sources. Yes, this is that kind of panel. All right, so let's begin with a fun game. I'm going to play some commercials, and I want you guys to raise your hands as soon as you can identify the brand or the product being advertised in each one. You do not need to be familiar with the brand, only at the point where you recognize that, yeah, that thing, whatever that is what's being advertised, okay? You ready? Okay, cool, here we go. That is so catchy. It's been stuck in my head for months. Oh, wrong button here. What the hell? Oops. What in the world?
It seems to be working.
It seems to be not wanting to work properly. Go figure, right? Alright, what are we doing here? Here we are. Weird. Alright, next one.
さすがうちのエース。このままじゃエースになれない。
いや、勝負はこれからだ。
Okay. Small children may choose to look away. Okay, I think there's one more in here. Like, where does that even come from? Okay, so it seems like a lot of you are having some amount of difficulty following those commercials. Well, whoever wrote them certainly didn't do you any favors. There are 2 rules of thumb I learned in college about making television commercials. First is that the audience should be able to understand the commercial even if it's on mute. Now, why is that? Well, because ads typically run from 15 to 30 seconds to a minute at most, Super Bowl ads notwithstanding. They need to make the most of the time they have. So, if the ad can't be understood without voiceover or dialogue, then it is not effectively using its visual component to convey the story or information to the audience. Of course, with any rule of thumb, there are some exceptions. For instance, if your brand is already firmly embedded in the cultural knowledge of the market, then you can get away with being a little less gung-ho about it because your audience is already very aware of your brand. For example, I'd like for you guys to complete the following slogans. All right, ready? There you go. The best part of waking up.
This Folgers in your cup.
Okay, good. All right. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's
Maybelline.
like a good neighbor.
State Farm is there.
Okay. guys had absolutely zero trouble picking up on those. What is it? I wonder if I can think of another one. Da 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 da.
I'm loving it.
There you go. So when a brand is firmly embedded in the culture of the market that's interacting with it, you can get away with not having to load up so much brand information. That is, of course, as I said, the exception. Now, with that rule of thumb in mind, if we look at this commercial, even if we were Japanese, with it in mute, we would have no idea what it would be advertising until 11 seconds in, roughly there, when the first bit of on-screen text appears. 11 seconds out of a 15-second ad. That's more than 2/3 of the way through the commercial. Which brings us neatly to the second rule of thumb I learned, which is the audience should be able to identify the brand of the commercial within the first 1/3 of it. That means 5 seconds for a 15-second spot, 10 seconds for a 30-second spot, or 20 seconds for a 60-second spot. This rule of thumb, both of them, really, actually came into existence because of the invention of the most disruptive innovation in television history. Anyone want to venture a guess as to what that is?
Channel changer.
The what?
Channel changer.
You mean the remote? Yup, it's the remote. Not the VCR, not the DVR. Being able to fast forward through commercials pales in comparison to the capability of muting them when it first came out in terms of disruptiveness. Yes, the television remote. In its early years, TV was treated much the same way as radio. Tuned to a channel and then left on that channel for hours, even. Particularly when there were a lot of variety shows. Variety shows were really cool. But in the 1950s, the president of Zenith Electronics, Eugene F. McDonald, called upon the engineers of the company for a solution to a problem. He hated sitting through commercials and wanted something that could let him mute the TV or change the channel without having to get up and walk to the TV to do so. And so in 1956, the first modern TV remote was born, the Zenith Space Command. Using ultrasonic technology and completely battery-free, which, would you guys like me to explain how it works? Because it's pretty cool. Y'all want to hear it?
Yeah.
Okay, so, dig this, right? Have you ever taken like a kid's xylophone toy and you hit the bar, right?
Yeah.
Makes a little ding, right? What happens if you make the bar really small? The pitch goes up, right? Okay, so the way this remote works is that each one of those buttons is connected to a hammer that hits a little aluminum bar that rings at ultrasonic frequencies. So it won't pass through a wall, and it won't go like a spectacularly long distance, but if you're sitting on the couch and you're pointing the remote at the TV, click, by the way, hence the invention of the word clicker, the TV remote, it makes a little click and the channel changes, or the TV gets muted. No batteries. It's amazing. Anyways, the Zenith Space Command made it possible for consumers to easily and conveniently escape commercials and was singularly responsible for the invention of the term zapping, which meant to switch channels to avoid commercials. Soon enough, marketers realized that the only way to defeat the remote and its dreaded zapping was to front-load the brand information in the commercial so that even if you switched the channel or muted the TV, you at least saw the product or brand being advertised. In contrast to that philosophy, the ramen commercial you watched earlier had it for like half a second, literally half a second, got rid of it, so no branding information for most of the commercial, and then at literally the last second, at the 14-second mark, cup noodle. And that's it. Okay, just to point this out, you just spent more time looking at the logos now than in the entirety of that brand. I have done more to cement the brand recognition of Nissan Cup noodles for you guys than the commercial did, okay? Now, but like this is an anime convention, so like how much work could I possibly have done by comparison? All right, now, not all Japanese commercials are this unintelligible, and in fact, I should point out that if you can understand Japanese and had the audio on, you'll likely be able to figure out the brand and the product being advertised much more quickly. But that being said, commercials like The Old Man and the Sea over here are not that uncommon either. This wasn't some cherry-picked example. So then, what do Japanese people get from these? When Japanese companies talk to Japanese audiences, what do they say? Well, most of the commercials were a bunch of vastly different products or services. The two biggest single categories were food or beverage items and video games, after which it drops off pretty quickly. One of the things we specifically looked for in our research were the different types of informational cues. In the survey, the researchers used the data to collect. The data for each commercial. I provided them with 14 categories of informational cues, the same categories used by Ramaprasad and Hasegawa, as well as the opportunity to fill in their own information, and they were told to select as many categories as they felt were applicable. One of the things, here we go. So here's the image of the survey we used for them to do it. I sent them each batches of commercials, and they filled out this big survey for every single one of them. Seriously, they did a lot of work. Actually, I'm streaming this to YouTube, so can we get a round of applause for the researchers? Woo! Awesome. So here we can see the top 5 categories of informational cues. And based on the data they collected, the most common type of informational cue present was about the components or contents of the product. This makes sense. The most important thing to convey to a consumer is what they get when they buy a thing. That being said, this is a flexible label and can be used, can apply to basically any kind of commercial out there for a product. Be it skin lotion, food, video games, whatever. What I personally found interesting was how small of a percentage the information cues present was about the quality of the product. It's just a little bit here. Now, in America, we are used to commercials talking about the quality. It's really one of the first things they talk about. Well, let's see, Verizon has the most coverage. The Toyota Tacoma is the most dependable pickup truck, according to J.D. Power and Associates. Or the Google Pixel 3 is the best smartphone camera, etc., etc. For as much of a reputation as Japanese products have for being well-made and reliable, I was really surprised that they don't talk about the quality of the product more. In terms of what broad types of appeals they did use, when Ramaprasad and Hasegawa did their study, they found out that roughly 75% of commercials relied on emotional appeals rather than informational ones. For me, well, I didn't follow Ramaprasad and Hasegawa's method exactly. See, when they were looking for informational cues, they decided that either a commercial could try to appeal to consumers with emotion or information, but never both. Which I think everyone in this room can, agree is crap, right? I mean, in terms of effectiveness, the best commercials leverage both your sense of reason and your emotions. If they didn't, how could they help you rationalize buying something you don't need? The weird thing is, though, Ramaprasad and Hasegawa acknowledge this. Quote, at the same time, only a few Japanese commercials do not use informational cues at all, end quote. But let's compare the numbers. For the sake of going more apples to apples, anytime a commercial had both informational and emotional appeals, I'll add that number to both categories. Just so, we'll make it fair, right? Compared to 30 years ago, the number of commercials with emotional appeals has stayed pretty much the same. It's at roughly 67% over here for... Well, hang on a second. By the way, this is the data. We go. Let's see, with combined, that should be 75.63%. So roughly the same, it stayed for emotional appeals. Logical appeals should be 19%, which is only about 5% off, 6% off from Ramapusa and Hasegawa's. So what does this mean exactly? Well, given that the amount of information-based commercials has gone down quite a bit, the logical or informational ones, there were a lot of commercials that my researchers couldn't identify what appeal was in play. So we have roughly 16% of the appeals being eaten up by neither. So this could mean that either the commercials are so confusing, even to people who speak Japanese, that it's just not understandable. It could be due to cultural context that they simply don't understand, being Japanese speakers living in North America. Or it could be that the commercial is so weird that literally no one understands it, and these results would be the same if someone in Japan conducted this study. Or any number of other reasons. More research is clearly required. So now that we've addressed what kind of information the commercials are trying to convey, let's move on to, I almost didn't bring that with me. And now I'm really glad that I did, because if I didn't, I'd have to open up the spreadsheet and show. The spreadsheet was so big and daunting and confusing that I was literally getting a headache trying to understand it. That's why I made these nice little summary sheets here, so I can get a nice little top-down view of this thing. All right, so now that we've addressed what kind of information the commercials are trying to convey, let's move on to how they're conveying them in terms of the artistic aspects of the commercials themselves. Just as a side note, I have a lot of friends who got their degree in film theory, and that is great. And they always have something cool or interesting to teach me about film and such. But I'm a production guy. I'm an audio engineer. I know how to make things. I know how to make things sound pretty and how to make them be the way that you want them to be. The why is not necessarily the most important aspect to me. And so we're not going to be talking about visual symbolism or psychological color theory. Instead, we're going to talk about, wow, that really breaks up the frame, or wow, those colors are vivid. That sort of thing. We're gonna stick to how things affect stuff in more practical terms and look more at how these commercials do that rather than why. We will talk about the why, but please do not expect me to go quoting Hitchcock. I personally feel this part of the panel is more fun because we're going to be spending a lot more time, looking at commercials. But I digress. Although I guess I don't, because hey, it's time to watch more commercials! But you didn't think you'd ever feel happy hearing those words. Anyways, you're going to watch some commercials now, and while you do, I'd like for you to think about what stands out to you about them from a visual perspective. What makes them visually feel different to you?
付き合いたい。
君にプレゼントしたいもの、それは自信。君がされたもの。
先輩、仮想通貨って知ってます？知ってる。最近よく聞くよね。中でもビットコインですよね。知ってる。もうめちゃくちゃ早いよね。ビットコインって見えないけど存在してるんですよね。そうなんだよね。しかもさ、ボワって脅かしてくるよね。ビットコインは脅かしませんよ。あれ？そうだっけ？先輩、本当に分かってます。すっごい知ってる。仮想で通貨はビットイン。DMM ビットコイン。 いいね見つかった？まだなんだよね。ああ、ひなこのスマホ。そう食べ過ぎ。スマホがあればいいねじゃん。画像もいっぱい。おお、ちょっとここ大学？私踊る。素直になれよひなこ。インターネットで探そう。ガイガイちゃん、リゾート当たる。着ます。いや、かわいい。
これなんやろ、これ盆栽さやけどこの G って何？グローバル社の G なん？それはなんで盆栽なん？普通の不動産会社と違うの？
お答えしよう。グローバル社は世界の不動産を面白くする会社です。
グローバル社よろしくね。いらっしゃい。
すごいですね、ひまわり。
へいよ。採用。
その髪はビアボーテひまわり。
クラシエ。
ダイナミック JTB ついにデビュー。移動無宿泊もセットでお得。いつでも最新価格なのに安心サポートも。あのデビュー。侍がデートしてた。やるじゃん。カッチカチ。はい。バレンタインジャンボじゃなくてバレンタインジャンボ？
グリーンジャンボはバレンタインジャンボ水曜から。
ビットフライヤービットフライヤーみんなで歌おう。ビットフライヤービットフライヤー明日は晴れるさ。世界を変えるコインビットコインはビットフライヤー。
ただごとじゃねえ。
Big mobile carrier. What mobile? I have no words for some of those commercials. They're just so crazy. Okay, so what did you notice about the visual style of those commercials? Hands up, one-word answers.
A lot of light glare.
One-word answers.
Glare.
A lot of light flare. What do you mean, a lot of light flare?
There was a lot of glaring light, like background.
A lot of glaring light. Okay, we're going to get to that. There's a word for that, and I'll tell you the word for it in a minute. Yes.
Right.
Very bright. Like, do you mean just like the overall brightness, or do you mean in terms of like color?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So in terms of color and brightness.
Saturated.
Saturated. There's a technical term for you.
Vivid.
Vivid. Good word. Okay, so there are a few things I often notice when I watch Japanese commercials, and if you haven't been able to tell, I've seen quite a few of them at this point. First off, a lot of them are overexposed.
Yeah.
They're meaning that they are way brighter than they really feel like they should be. You can see this in areas that have white in them. Super overexposed over here. This table and trays, I mean, they're white, but they are way brighter than they need to be. And the chair and the woman's back of the chair over here, the chair over here, this woman's sweatshirt. The sweatshirt gets a bit better over time throughout that commercial, but it's like in this opening scene, everything is super overexposed. When filming, there are a lot of tools built into the camera that help cinematographers and DPs figure out if something is overexposed. And not just help the zebra lines. They had like a whole zoo of lines going on. Second, Japanese commercial, and that's totally great. I mean, they're just, the details are totally washed out, which is why we don't do it. And even if there are some areas that aren't technically overexposed, most of these commercials are much brighter than they're really used to. Second, Japanese commercials seem to be remarkably vivid and high in contrast. Here we go. You can either through set design or costume design or post-production or combination of all three, colors are vibrant and pop out at you. Even in seemingly mundane settings like in convenience stores, everything pops. These two traits, combined with fast action or quick editing, can lead to a very common feeling that Japanese commercials are just they're kinda a lot. They're really a lot. They're just kinda extra sometimes. A little intense, maybe. I mean, this whole thing here. I mean, it's cute. And sure, I'd love to see a high school look like that for hilarity's sake, but you know, it's a bit much. The fact that these are visible, these traits are visible so consistently across so many commercials would seem to suggest that this is not just the style of one or two directors, but one typical in Japanese commercials as a genre. More specifically, Japanese produced commercials. Because there are some commercials that, while they air in Japan and are for Japanese companies, intended for Japanese audiences, they are clearly not Japanese in origin. Just because of how different they feel. I'm going to play for you two commercials from the same category of product, women's undergarments. And afterwards, I want you to tell me which one felt like it was more or less Japanese than the other. Okay?
ダイエットじゃありません。マルコです。
30歳やっと思った。着飾る美しさよりもありのままの美しさで勝負しよう。今なら自信を持って言える。無敵の美しさ、心地よさ。ワイヤレス、リミットレス。ワイヤレスブラはユニクロ。
Okay, so, I just realized this here. Just to let you know, it is entirely common to hear Western music in Japanese produced commercials. Just to clarify that, so that's not the basis of your reasoning, okay? So, raise your hand if you felt commercial number 1 was produced in Japan. Okay, so I'd say that's about half the room. A little more than half. Okay? Now, commercial number 2. Okay, and one undecided. That's fine. Okay, so, as a matter of fact, commercial number 2 was produced here in the United States. And it feels, to me, and apparently half of you guys, roughly, like a US commercial. Or at least, it doesn't feel like a Japanese one by comparison, at the very least. Moving away from the, how much time we got in here? About 25 minutes-ish. I'm gonna play you one more commercial. I gotta go dig for this one a little bit. I'm gonna play it for you guys here. And I want to show you what I want to show you guys what a commercial produced, what a Japanese commercial, especially, and this is really cool, especially for global brands. Love global brands as comparisons here. I was afraid I wasn't going to have time, that's why I didn't put it in the slide deck. Okay, so here's a commercial for a global brand that is made, that was produced in Japan for Japan. Okay? Let's see if I can't. No, I don't want Himawari. Oh, we just saw that. Come on. Eyes. Which way is it? There it is. Here we go. Back that up. Okay, so that was a global brand commercial produced in Japan for Japanese people. Now, if I can find it, which I should be able to. Oh wait, I guess we're gonna end up seeing the spreadsheet after all.
Dun dun dun.
There's like 500 lines to that, and there's 4 sheets in this. Woof. Let's see. Harry Potter. There we go. Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journeys at Universal Studios Japan. That is commercial number 98. What is that? Komari. Margin. Here we go.
世界最高峰ライドがもっとスリルついに肉眼は 3D を超えた人類未体験の鮮やかさで今まで以上セラミックこれまで以上巻き込まれる今度の魔法は次回に続くハリー・ポッター・オブ・ザ・フォービドゥン・ジャーニー完全版ユニバーサル・スタジオ・ジャパン
So do you guys see how that doesn't feel like the other Japanese commercials that we saw? That right there is called brand control. That is heavy branding control. There's actually another commercial mixed in here that is a combination of a commercial for that and for the rest of Universal Japan, and the tonal shift gives you whiplash. Maybe if we have time at the end of this, I'll try and find. Let's see here. So, moving away from visuals a little bit, Japanese ads have this wonderful affair with jingles. Wonderful love affair with jingles that I think we've kind of lost here in the U.S. Yeah, we have a few, big brands that still have their jingles, but like, how long has McDonald's had "I'm loving it"? Right? Or maybe it's Maybelline. How long have we had those? Actually. The Nationwide is on your side. That jingle is, that jingle is very old. They remade it, but it's an old jingle. Meanwhile, while we are relatively jingle-free, Japan is jingle all the way. And I'd like to take a minute to teach you a couple of them. Good news, though, you probably already know them. Okay? So, ready? If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
仕事探しはインディード
バイト探しもインディード
仕事探しはインディード
それすごいややかましい
仕事バイト探しはインディード
That's a commercial for Indeed. The job hunting site. By the way, just as a side note, and you're going to see this one very shortly, job hunting services are huge in Japan right now. Right up there with Bitcoin commercials. There's a lot of job hunting commercials right now, a lot of job hunting services. Here's the next one. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni.
バイトするならバイトのアプリコーヒーこぼして恋をしたすいません Hey バイトバイトバイトアプリバイトバイトバイトバイトバイトバイトアプリはバイトだな Hey バイトアプリはバイトだ
It's a little weird.
What's the for?
I mean, it's a little weird to me hearing like Japanese, hearing American children's songs as jingles for Japanese commercials. By the way, the word baito is a shortened form of the word in Japanese for part-time job. And that's a beautiful visual pun on it, because it's baito. Just for clarification, most Japanese commercials do not repurpose American children's songs. I just brought up these examples because I thought they were funny. In reality, music is typically used more as background music in commercials than as jingles. In the process of my research, I did learn an interesting factoid. So you might have noticed that commercials with music tend to put credit on the screen, like down here. You know, you'll see those a lot in Japanese commercials. Well, as it turns out, if a Japanese commercial uses a song that was recorded in Japan, they don't have to pay a licensing fee as long as it's used within a year of the song's release. Here in the United States, you can't so much as look at a song funny without paying a licensing fee if you're a content creator. All right, so there's one last thing I want to talk about, and it's got to do with something that is deeply structural to the genre of commercials as a whole. When you are dealing with ad campaigns, there are two basic types. The first is one where multiple different ads follow the same basic template or share similar events. The ad campaign with Farmers Insurance, where J. Jonah Jameson is talking about horrible accidents and things that they've covered in the past. You know, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. You know, that whole campaign. They just share similar elements, but there's no narrative continuity to them. They aren't narratively related, and there's no real discernible story. They just have stuff in common. Think about, like the Baito commercials. You know, all the Baito commercials follow that same sort of pattern. Or the most interesting man in the world ad campaign for Dos Equis. The second type is just the opposite. The ad follows a narrative progression, and there is a story, even if it can be flimsy sometimes. It is never flimsy for Japanese commercials. Never, ever, ever. Not that I've seen. They put a stupid amount of effort into them. To demonstrate this, and on the off chance that there is some Japanese person watching this later on with subtitles, you put way too much effort into the narrative content of your commercials. To demonstrate this, I present to you the final set of commercials scheduled for this panel. The Tale of Long Man! An ad campaign for Sakerogumi that aired from 2017 to 2018.
どうしたの？
トールさんが避ける組咲いてる時の顔が好き。
そう？
もっと長く見てたいな。
あー。危ないね、あの人。叫ぶみたい、長い叫ぶの。
ああ、テリーさん見て、テナガザル。こっちはゾウさんだ。
ちーちゃんは長いのが好きなんだね。
別に意識してるわけじゃないけど。
気のせいか。あー。前にも言ったね、あの長い人。叫る組だい、長い叫る組。出先で叫る組のマンゴー見つけてさ、バイク便で送ったから。
すごいタイミング。
サインお願いします。
届いたよ。ありがとう。
マンゴー味珍しいからたくさん買ったんだ。今度2人で食べようね。おい、ちーちゃん。
叫る組だい、長い叫る組。
それ触ってみてもいいんですか？
どうぞ。
長い。これどうやって咲くんですか？
こんな風に。すいません。叫る組だい、長い叫る組。電話出ないから心配になって。
ちょっと寝込んでて。
これ持ってきたから一緒に食べよう。
今日は
今あのね
叫ぶんだよ仲間に叫ぶんだよ
ちいちゃんどうして俺じゃなくてこいつなんだよそれはかけりゃいいのかよピローピローちいちゃん
黙っててごめん実は私もう長くないのだから長いものを見ると安心できるの
叫ぶんだよ長い叫ぶんだよ
She's
どう
fine.
してそんな猿芝居したの目移りするのキーの悪い癖だよ
だって長いんだもん
長さに騙されてんじゃねえよ避ける分一袋分並べていくと
Oh
ほら
my god.
同じ長さになるの食べやすいようにわざわざ切ってあるんだよ
トールさん優しい
叫ぶんだよ長い叫ぶん
ちいちゃん聞いてもいい？
何
プロポーズってどんな風にされたい？正直に言ってごらん。
フラッシュモブは嫌かななんかこっぱずかしいしフラッシュモブいいよ
ちいちゃん僕と結婚
叫ぶんだよ長い叫ぶん
ちいちゃん。
ダメ結婚式までお預け
シェーおやすみ。
おやすみ食べるとおしまいください
どちらまで
どうしてやっぱり忘れられない
叫ぶんだよ長い叫ぶん
叫んじゃねえぞ。頭よ。
叫ぶんだよ長い叫ぶん
私長い間あなたのこと待ってたのトールさんごめんなさい私のことは忘れて分かったでしょ私はひどい女なの
ああもう俺やだどうしていつも俺の前に現れるんだよ
一目見た時から君のことが
What? What? Oh my god. What's up?
トール君
俺嘘だ
バカ言ったのにどうして
僕らはきっと分かり合える触ってみてもいいですかああきっとみんな分かり合える叫ぶ組長い叫ぶ組
Hold on. Oh, my cell phone's over there.
Yeah.
All right. Just once. All together. Ready? Loud, man! Oh my God. Oh, Jesus. Okay, so.
Right.
Where do we go from here? As I said, there is more research to be done. In addition to just gathering more data on commercials, the first thing that we need to do would be to have more researchers look at the commercials we've already collected data on so that we can fill in any gaps in the data and provide additional data for each commercial so that maybe we can average it out with what we have in order to filter out any noise or biases in the data. More data, always good. Secondly, I'd like to essentially conduct the same survey, but this time with an equally large set of American commercials. This way we can compare and contrast between them and actually be able to quantify any differences in terms of how each use appeals to communicate to the consumer. Lastly, I would like to run some automated image analysis on all of the commercials, separated out from frame by frame, so we can understand and find out if Japanese commercials are really brighter and more vibrant on average than American ones. Collect some real data on the look and aesthetic instead of running with a subjective analysis. If you take a closer look at the studies I've used, if you would like to take a closer look at the studies I used for both direct citation and for background research, because the 3 or 4 studies that I cited are nothing compared to all of the ones I read on the subject to figure out the best way to do this. If you'd like to take a closer look at those, or if you'd like to take a look at a subset of the data that my researchers and I collected and compiled, they're all right here. That's what this entire binder is. You can please feel free to come up and take a look. Additionally, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. At any rate, I hope you guys enjoyed this little presentation of mine. I hope you have a great rest of your con. One more commercial. Which one was that?
The other Universal?
Ah, you're right. I do have a little. You know, I got like
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Tell you what. While I'm looking through this, while I'm looking through this to see if I can find that commercial because it's all numbered. If you guys have questions, now's the time to ask them. Right.
One of the other differences I noticed between the American produced, even if they were meant for Japan commercials, or American commercials in general, and the Japanese commercials, is I feel like the Japanese are much more comfortable with exuberant emotions, like the sort of weirdness that we only really see in viral videos. Like American commercials just seems like they're more sedate, and a lot of times they're less, maybe it's just the performance style, like they're less what we would consider histrionic or exuberant or...
Ironically, if you were to ask someone to give stereotypes about Americans and Japanese people, it would probably be the exact opposite.
Right, yeah.
Which is super weird to me. I noticed that too, and I was like, what is that? Like, okay, so let's see, this suit commercial, right? Let's see if it'll come up on that screen. There we go.
青木のフレッシャー
What the? I don't need the internet for this!
That's like a bird.
I don't need the internet for this. I'm just gonna let this one run because I don't know that song.
歴代の選手たちを失敗だぜファイナルファンタジー再びモンスターに召喚
Like the announcer would never scream like that.
No, they absolutely wouldn't. Let's see, that's another SoftBank commercial. So many SoftBank commercials. And then let's see, that's another commercial with some kind of idol group on it. Let's see. Let's see. What number? 154. Here we go.
ユニバーサルクールジャパン今年のクールジャパンはファイナルファンタジーも
That's not the one I'm looking for, but it's an example of how Japanese produced Universal commercials work.
期間限定ユニバーサルクールジャパン
Wow.
広瀬もスマホばっかりいじってダメ人間なんだあれだわ
でも私スマホで
Sailor Moon. Commercial number 132.
怖いね先生無理引き
There we go. Here we go. Okay, so this is the one with the Harry Potter commercial and one for the park in general in the same thing. You will know exactly when the production I'm companies switched, okay? I want Detective Conan rides.
仕事探しはインディードバイト探しもインディード仕事探しはインディード
仕事いつから
見つかり次第仕事バイト探しはインディード
One and the 1992 paper that they published, with the studies taking place in 1987 and 1989, respectively. God, I keep on flipping pages to try and get to the studies, but it's spreadsheet after spreadsheet. It's just so much. Is what it is. Last page. Okay. So like they straight up say here that let's see. The logical motion, specific, was it in this one? They take umbrage. If you ever want drama, look up drama in the academic community, because Ramaprasad and Hasegawa throw some serious shade on there was one author that really, it was a proponent of the idea that globalized marketing strategies are more effective than marketing strategies localized to the demographics you're targeting to. And they just throw so much shade on them. Okay, so it is 7 o'clock. My time is officially over. I'm going to pack up my gear, but while I do that, if you have questions, I can answer them. Okay?
Questions? Any questions? Yes? How are the...
I was actually pointing at him because he just put his hand up there. That's why. Yeah.
I'm just curious. You said earlier there were 2 YouTube channels that had commercials?
There were a lot of YouTube channels that upload Japanese commercials. I specifically chose JPCMHD because they uploaded commercials pretty much raw. There is a minor watermark up in the top corner, but nothing that could be misconstrued by you guys as, say, a brand logo, which is why I specifically chose him. Yeah, it's a guy, I think. So that is why I specifically chose JPCMHD. But yeah, there are a lot of YouTube channels which do that, and they're for people like me, they are a fantastic resource. The only issue that I have is that because I don't know the method behind the madness, it's hard to compensate for in data and in models. So it's one of those yay but oh kind of situations. Yeah.
I was going to ask, how much is cord cutting as a phenomenon taken over Japan as opposed to compared to the United States, like people not even watching live TV anymore?
Okay, so a large portion of the commercials that I saw were oriented, how do I put this? Were towards media consumption apps. Do you want to close this? All files that have been pending upload on the server can be viewed here. I'll just but there were a lot of commercials for media consumption services, things like manga readers, anime viewing services, things like that. But I didn't really see any for we see a lot of commercials here for Hulu or Netflix, right? I didn't see anything like that. I mean, granted, even large number though it is, 428 commercials or so is a lot of commercials, but compared to how many commercials are out there, it's not a lot, and it is entirely conceivable that this guy just didn't record it. And that, again, that ties into the problem that because I don't know the source of the methodology of the originating data set, because I'm not controlling the research from point A to point B, I can't tell you with 100% certainty that those commercials don't exist. In terms of cord cutting in general, how much it's happening in Japan, I have to imagine that it is something that is going on. But here's the thing. If you are Japanese, and this system works the same way in Britain as it does in Japan, if you own a television, you're paying a television tax. You're paying a viewership tax. That's how NHK1 and NHK3 are funded.
Oh.
Commercial channel, because NHK1 and NHK3 and NHK World, for us here in the English-speaking world, NHK World, which is viewable for free online. You can stream it anytime you want. There's an app for the Roku if you want, you know? But that being said, since they're paying the tax for the TV anyways, maybe they're just watching everything over the air. That's one of the things that you would need access to Nielsen data for, because Nielsen, the Nielsen people meters, which is what they are, that's what they're called. The Nielsen people meters don't care if you're on cable or over the air. They'll be able to identify what you're watching, and you're supposed to tell Nielsen how you're watching it too. So it's one of those things that need more data. Need more data where there's gaps that need to be filled, and that's the crux of the argument here. There's gaps that need to be filled, and the data is there somewhere. It's just a matter of the fact that I don't have access to that data to answer that specific question. Any other questions? All right, then oh yeah.
I came in late, but what is there any wrong with the American commercial or any other commercial?
Any what?
Is there something wrong with the American commercial?
No, there's nothing wrong with American commercials. It's just a different style. We have a different way of communicating. American advertisers. Okay, so that was Victor Frost, the convention panelist. This is Victor Frost, the owner of a production company. As media creators, as content creators, the way we communicate with our audiences are fundamentally different here in the United States than they are elsewhere in the world. Particularly when it comes to broadcast television, particularly when it comes to communicating through commercial television. The way we create our productions, the way we run them, the styles that we use are based on a lineage of production that extends back all the way into the origination of cinema. Japanese cinema and Japanese TV production started after us. We started producing films before Japan did. We have a set language of cinema that's based on Western media. Japanese media has a production language that's based on Japanese media. And yes, when we were running Japan, when America was running Japan for that brief period post World War II, we brought with us a lot of things there. We brought media creation technology. We brought a lot of media creation technology. We brought our films with us. We brought our music with us. We brought American culture into Japan because we were there too. And so that has had an impact on the language of cinema and media in Japan. That being said, the influence of Japanese media and art and culture on their media is undeniable. And it's probably why why Japanese commercials are so vivid, so bright, so frenetic at times. And so to say the way Americans make commercials is bad or wrong is contextualizing the way art is created in a manner of which does not recognize that the culture and media is created in has an impact on that media, that there is no right way. It's like saying there's a right way and a wrong way to making a painting. Yeah. It's neither bad nor good, it's just the way it is. And I can certainly understand that if you look at Japanese commercials or if you look at American commercials and say, yes, this is the right way of making something, you'll get that, you'll come up with that impression. But any art teacher will tell you that there is no right way to art. So I think you guys have to clear the room before the next programming event. So that being said, thank you for coming, guys. I appreciate it, and I hope to see you at some of my other events.
Thank you.
All right. Is the next panelist in the room? No. Okay. Are you guys here for the next panel? Awesome. Okay. That
turned into a bit of a rant, huh?
A little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. No, it's fine. It's what you do.
Yeah, it's what I do.
Both in the rant sense and also in what you do as a journalist.
Yeah.
Hello, my friend.
Well, I mean, hey, so I'm going to do my best to stream more of these throughout the weekend. In the meantime, stay